Imagine a world where forests, farms, and microbes don't just produce food, fuel, or fiber, but act as partners in healing our planet, where what we eat, build with, and waste becomes part of the solution. That world is the vision of the bioeconomy, and many experts believe it could be one of our strongest levers to pull in the race against climate change and biodiversity loss. But turning vision into reality demands something often harder than innovation. It demands collaboration across countries, across industries, across ecosystems. Recent research by Chatham House, titled How Strategic Collaboration on the Bioeconomy Can Boost Climate and Nature Action, makes that case strongly. It shows that while many bio-based strategies are emerging around the world, the lack of coordination, policy fragmentation, and uneven capacities are holding us back. So let's walk together through what the bioeconomy is, what's going right and what's holding it back globally, and how ancient wisdom can guide modern practice toward justice, balance, and care. First, what is the bioeconomy? At its heart, bioeconomy refers to economies built using biological resources, plants, animals, microbes, and innovations such as biorefineries, alternative proteins, bioplastics, carbon sequestration through nature, circular systems, and more. It offers multiple potential benefits: lower carbon emissions, nature conservation, economic development, job creation, renewable materials, climate resilience. But deploying it sustainably is complex. Globally, more than 50 countries now have some form of national bioeconomy strategy. Regions are also coming together. East Africa has a regional bioeconomy strategy involving Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and South Sudan, focusing on food systems, bio-based industries, and waste use. At the same time, land, forest, and biomass endowments are not evenly distributed. Asia leads in grazing land, 10 million kwartu, with China holding about 4 million kwart of that alone. Then Australia, the US, Brazil, and Kazakhstan follow. Similarly, for cropland, Asia has the largest area. India, China, US, Russia, Indonesia all have large shares. For forest area, Russia, Brazil, Canada, and the US lead among the world's largest. These differences in natural resources are an opportunity, but also carry risks. If countries with lots of resource endowments don't build processing and value-adding capacity, like biorefineries, bio-industrial parks, technology, skilled labor, they may export raw biomass but import final products, losing jobs and value. The research shows that countries like Brazil, China, EU, India are seen as potential leaders because they have both bioresources and growing processing investment capability. But what stands in the way? 1. Land use trade-offs. If you convert too much land to biofuel crops or bioplastics feedstock, you risk reducing space for food crops, natural habitats, biodiversity. Innovation needs to be rolled out in ways that spare land, restore ecosystems, integrate nature-based solutions. Chatham House notes that to limit warming to 1.5 degrees by 2050, greenhouse gas emissions must drop in 84% from 2019 levels. The bioeconomy has a role to play, but only if deployed carefully. 2. Fragmented governance and policy. Many national strategies exist, but far fewer have clear implementation plans, financing mechanisms, monitoring and evaluation, or strong regulatory guardrails. Some strategies are aspirational, others lack technical capacity, infrastructure, or incentives to scale. Without coordination between governments, private sector, academia, and civil society, the risk is that innovations remain niche, or worse, that environmental or social harms emerge. 3. Global inequities. Wealthier nations often lead bioeconomy R&D, have better access to funding, technology, and markets. Poorer countries, particularly tropical, nature-rich ones, have both the richest potential in biodiversity and bioresources, and the greatest risk of harm from mismanaged transitions, for example, loss of ecosystems, land grabbing, or displacement of communities. There are also promising signs of collaboration. Brazil has launched a global bioeconomy initiative. The G20 adopted high-level bioeconomy principles in 2024. Banks in Latin America and national development banks are increasingly involved. Platforms like the Food and Agriculture Organization's Global Bioeconomy Dashboard help decision-makers see how bioeconomy strategies align with climate, biodiversity, and socioeconomic goals. Now, let's bring in Quranic insight, because any transition that concerns land, nature, and human societies needs moral grounding as well as scientific. The Quran teaches in Surah Ar-Rahman, chapter 55, verse 10, "And the earth he has placed for creatures." This reminds us that earth is not property for exploitation. It is entrusted for all living beings. Stewardship over biological resources, over land, over forests, is not optional. It is part of the amana given to humanity. Global wisdom also calls for fairness in sharing resources. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse 48, it is said, "And we have sent down to you the book in truth, confirming whatever preceded it of the scripture and as a criterion over it, competed then in good deeds. To Allah is your return altogether, so He will inform you of what you used to do." While this verse speaks broadly, the principle of competing in good and acting rightly across different communities implies that when nations have different capacities and endowments, they are still called to act justly and cooperatively. Putting this into practice, what could global bioeconomy collaboration look like? Let's imagine a few concrete cases. In Latin America, a partnership between rainforest-rich Brazil and nations in Central America might scale sustainable forestry for both carbon offset, nature protection, and timber, while ensuring local communities benefit. In Southeast Asia, countries like Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam might coordinate on waste biomass from agriculture and food processing, turning post-harvest waste into biofuels, bioplastics, or feed. Shared technology transfer, shared biorefinery projects, shared regulatory standards. In Africa, where much land is unused or underused, collaboration could enable agroforestry, restoration of degraded land, and value-adding local processing so that raw biomass is not simply exported. For example, the East African Regional Bioeconomy Strategy already works across countries like Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, to focus on sustainable industries and local capacity. From science and economics, we know scale matters. Innovation clusters, value chains, stable policy, finance and interoperability, shared standards, make transitions cheaper and faster. Where countries align on bioeconomy regulations, capacity building, and equitable benefit sharing, both climate and nature outcomes improve. This is echoed in another Quranic instruction. In Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 205, we are cautioned about those who strive throughout the land to cause corruption therein. Here, corruption includes misuse of land, depletion of ecosystems, inequitable resource grabbing. A healthy bioeconomy must avoid corruption of nature and society, so that growth does not become destruction. So, what are the priorities? According to the Chatham House analysis, 1. Clubs of complementary nations that share resources and capacities, nations rich in biomass, in R&D, in processing, and together build supply chains and standards. 2. Policy frameworks and regulatory guardrails that protect ecosystems, ensure fair land use, safeguard communities, and monitor impacts, environmental and social. 3. Investments in innovation systems, biorefineries, alternative proteins, microbial feedstocks, carbon capture utilization, etc. ensuring that the innovations are both environmentally and socially sustainable. 4. Alignment in multilateral forums. Use G20, COP30, Convention on Biological Diversity, UN forums to set principles, commitments, finance mechanisms that work globally. Brazil, Colombia, and other tropical countries are well placed to lead in shaping these discussions. In Surah Al-Mumtahana, chapter 60, verse 8, the Quran says, Allah does not forbid you from those who do not fight you because of religion and do not expel you from your homes, from being righteous toward them and acting justly toward them. Indeed, Allah loves those who act justly. This verse can inspire how nations treat each other in collaboration, not as competitors only, but as partners, even among those who differ in capacity, geography, or religion. Now, let's glimpse into what this collaboration must avoid. Race to capture land or resources without consideration of ecological limits or local livelihoods. This can lead to deforestation, displacement, loss of biodiversity. Overemphasizing certain bioeconomy paths, like biofuels or bioplastics, without considering carbon or land trade-offs. Failing to build standards or accountability, leading to greenwashing, unfair value capture, or concentration of profit in a few hands. And what could success look like? A world where tropical countries lead in restoring ecosystems, processing biomass locally, generating jobs and sharing value, not simply exporting raw materials. Innovation pipelines where feedstocks come from waste, from microbes, circular systems, minimizing land use, maximizing nature-positive outcomes. Global finance flowing more equitably, tech and skills transferred for local benefit, and international forums taking decisions not for narrow interests but for planetary health. The Quran in Surah Al-Imran, chapter 3, verse 200 says, O you who have believed, persevere and endure and remain stationed, and fear Allah that you may be successful. This call to perseverance, endurance, station, steadfastness, and God consciousness reminds us that transitions are long, require patience, thoughtful action, and moral accountability. In the end, the bioeconomy is more than a technical fix. It is a test of values: justice, inclusion, humility, and care for creation. If collaboration is strong, and if the moral compass holds, then the bioeconomy can become not just a tool for clean growth, but a path toward healing climate, restoring nature, and dignifying human lives.